Hello, welcome back to the second episode for the Berlin Marathon training series. In this series, I'm documenting my journey as I prepare for the 2022 Berlin Marathon, which will be my third Berlin Marathon, and I'm currently attempting to better my PB of 2:56. In this episode, I talk about the Big Half Marathon, which took place on September the 4th, and I used it as a training run to practice my marathon training effort, and I'm also going to share how the day went and my thoughts about the race afterwards. It's 6 in the morning. I'm about to head to the train station to head towards London Bridge. I'm running the Big Half in preparation for the Berlin Marathon. I'll let you know how the race goes, and I've also got some special content talking about marathon nutrition, speaking with Registered Dietitian Laura Tilt. So stay tuned. As a marathon-paced effort, I finished in 1:24:13, ran the first half in 42 minutes and 2 seconds, and the second half in 42 minutes and 11 seconds, so a 9-second positive split. A key lesson I've learned is when you cross the finish line and there's 2 timing mats, make sure you sprint to the second one, because it still could record your time. Sometimes people stop at the first and walk to the second, and you know you've lost seconds there, so make sure that you always sprint towards the second timing mat. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, but I haven't raced a half marathon since 2018, so I completely forgot what my half marathon PB was. So I didn't actually realise until a good friend of mine pointed it out that my power of 10 had now been updated. I don't want this to sound like a humble brag, but I literally was not trying to race it. I was just trying to run a hard marathon effort and just maintain it from start to finish. So I feel that, and to be honest, I'm surprised it was a PB because I had about 5 hours sleep going into it. My kids weren't sleeping. It was an early start, and you know, you start a race sometimes you're just like, why am I here? That's exactly how I felt pre-race. So, and I always think of that Navy SEAL quote about, you know, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our processes. So I like to think that the training hopefully has put me in good stead to, even not at my best, to run a good time. So that's encouraging as I head towards Berlin. Okay, so post-race, my man Simon, we're working together in the build-up for London. We had a good race today. We both used it as like training runs. How did you go on?
122. Really pleased with that for my build-up to London. So just going to stay nice and safe for the next couple of weeks. Keep the legs intact and everything. But yeah, happy with that.
It's a good solid run. I'm really happy with it. I'm so confident you're going to make sub 3. I'm putting it out there. On to the next one. Obviously, a rest day tomorrow, an easy run. But obviously, all these turnarounds are probably throwing everyone. But we're going down the DLR, so.
Post-run.
Yeah. Like, where are you going post-run? Jeez. But no, it was a good run today. Really happy with that. And follow. So what's your Insta?
Mr. Random.
And the other one.
Running away from my hair.
Put that on there. Hi Laura, welcome to a Runner's Life podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really good. So my name is Laura Tilt. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a dietitian for about 8 years now, but I've been studying nutrition actually for about 20, ever since at college, and I got really interested in nutrition, finding out like all the nutrients that were in an egg, weirdly. So that's how I got into it. And then, after becoming a dietitian, I basically worked in a hospital environment for a few years and was helping people who had problems with their gut, so things like celiac disease or IBS. At the same time, I was also doing a diploma in sports nutrition as well, which I found really interesting because, as we're going to be talking about a lot today, one of the really amazing things I think about sports nutrition is that we can do really specific things with people's diets and see measurable changes in performance and how people feel like during their runs. Whereas in other, I guess, areas of nutrition, we might say, oh, if you do this now, it will protect your health in the next 10, 20 years. And I think people find that kind of thing, it's less tangible, isn't it? Whereas if you can make a change within a few days, start feeling and seeing the benefit, that's kind of, I think, really exciting. I stopped working in a hospital probably about 6 or 7 years ago now and went to freelance practice. So I see people on a one-to-one basis, quite a lot of gut health stuff, and also working with some people in eating disorders and also kind of fueling for sport, that type of thing, and work with companies on helping them to translate nutrition information, like nutrition advice basically, into practical stuff. So yeah.
Let's discuss the essentials that runners need to consider for marathon training. So can you talk about the importance, please, of carbohydrates?
Yeah. The very short top line is that carbs are king, but the more in-depth explanation. So when we're at rest and when we're exercising, we're always using a mixture of fuels, so fat and carbohydrate essentially, and that's basically fuels our muscle contraction. And as exercise intensity and duration increases, the body increasingly relies on carbohydrate to fuel muscle contraction. So when we're kind of doing maybe sort of low to maybe like moderate intensity, we're maybe using a mix of fuels like 50-50 fat and carbs. But as we get towards high intensity exercise, 70% or more of our energy will be coming from stored carbohydrate. And that's essentially because the body can basically convert carbohydrate into, it's called ATP. It's basically like your muscle's energy source, much more efficiently and much more economically than it can fat. And particularly when maybe we're working really, really hard, then the body is almost exclusively using carbohydrate. So that's why it's important, because it powers high intensity and sort of endurance exercise. And the other side of why we need it so much is that we can only store really limited amounts. So we store carbohydrate as something called glycogen. That's basically just stored carbohydrate. And we store that in our muscles and also our liver. But we can only store quite small amounts, whereas the body can store large amounts of fat. So, if we were just able to use fat endlessly, like we probably could go for a really long time. We wouldn't need to kind of refuel, if you like, so much. But with carbohydrate, if you were really well stocked, it would probably last you for about 2, maybe maximum 3 hours of kind of, some sort of endurance exercise. But yeah, most people aren't kind of sort of that stocked up, if you like. And so we also need to remember that our bodies are using carbohydrate all the time. So the brain is a really kind of carbohydrate hungry organ, if you like. And after an overnight sleep, most of our liver glycogen has gone as well. So we've got so we need carbohydrate for high intensity exercise. Our body's constantly using it and we can't store that much, which means that having a high carbohydrate diet is really important to fuel training, to perform at your best.
I mean, what's your general thoughts, especially, I know you've covered it there, but like when people come to you and they say, I'm going to be fat adapted for marathon training, what's your initial thoughts?
I think it's always really good to have the conversation and maybe find out where those ideas have come from, and maybe they've listened to a podcast or seen something online, and also just to kind of break it down. I mean, there were a lot of studies that looked into, if we can teach the body to burn more or oxidize more fat during exercise, then we're tapping into an almost unlimited energy source, right? That means people won't need to drink have gels and consume carbohydrates on runs. It'll be a lot easier. You can just tap into this almost finite energy source. And it's true that if you follow a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, your body does become better, or does sort of start increasing its ability to oxidize fat during exercise, and you're training during those times. However, what the research also shows is that it actually stops your muscles' ability then to burn glycogen. And as we've talked about already, you need to be able to sort of oxidize glucose or carbohydrates at those really high intensities. So if you're someone that was doing very like long and quite slow, kind of types of exercise, potentially, there might be benefits. But for somebody that really wants to be able to have enough power and wants to be able to work at these really high intensities, then, we have seen time and time again in the research that actually it can limit or hamper performance. And also a lot of people will find it really, really difficult. I don't know what your experience is, Marcus, but we'll find it really difficult training on low carbs because it feels really hard. Like it feels a lot harder, like you'll fatigue, you won't be able to kind of put out the same sort of performance as you're used to. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit later about kind of fasted, having some occasional like fasted sessions, or sessions where you're training with what we call like low carbohydrate availability. So just you're not kind of like fully stocked up. The tank's not full, if you like. And it's better to do sessions that are kind of slow, basically, or not quite as tough, because you won't be able to meet those high intensities.
So we're going to move into the clearing of myths. So one question I want to ask as well, with the we're always told that there's a recovery window of 30 minutes. Like if you miss this 30 minutes recovery window, then it's all over. Is that true? Okay, so if you want to find out the answers to that question and learn about some other myths that we debunk, we also go into what a typical training week looks like in terms of nutrition, using me as a guinea pig, so you get to see what I eat and what improvements I can make and what things I'm doing well. Plus we give you some general advice about what you should be doing in the week of the marathon and leading up to marathon day in terms of fueling. So if you want to find out a little bit more, listen to episode 137 of a Runner's Life podcast. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for watching this episode of the Berlin Marathon Training Series. Please subscribe to catch the next episode.